July 2, 1944. A hidden cave serving as a hospital near Cherbourg, France. The pristine white coat draped casually over her frame as Dr. Schwester stepped out from the dim underground shadows, palms up in submission, her eyes narrowing in the bright sun she hadn't encountered for several days. The U.S. troops surely couldn't possess the medical resources they boasted about. This had to be mere hype aimed at crushing our spirits. Those remarks she had shared with her nursing colleagues merely hours before, inside the deep cavern clinic dug under the defenses close to Cherbourg, would shortly turn out to be the initial in a series of overturned beliefs. Trailing her, 8 additional nurses from the German military ventured into the light, ranking among the earliest such personnel taken by U.S. troops amid the French campaign. In the closing moments of the encirclement, they had cared for injured Wehrmacht fighters using flickering candles, stretching their remaining morphine doses, and repeatedly sterilizing dressings for repeated application. Unbeknownst to any of them, in just a short time, they would observe healthcare prowess that directly challenged all they had learned regarding U.S. inferiority and Teutonic excellence. These 9 caregivers, seized following aid to the hurt in settings that evoked ancient procedures far more than contemporary practice, stood on the brink of encountering a healthcare network so sophisticated and resource-rich that it would dismantle not only their professional knowledge, but their whole worldview. At the 45th Evacuation Hospital in Lam, Colonel Richard P. Johnson, the unit's leader, regarded them with interest instead of animosity, viewing them as opposing medics but shared practitioners. Soon enough, these women would head back to German positions in line with Geneva Convention guidelines. Altogether, 16 such nurses swapped sides on July 2nd and July 9th. Yet prior to that, they would get a close look at 1944-era American healthcare. Drugs whispered about in tales, procedures exceeding their expertise. The mental effects would endure well beyond their short detention. The process of disillusionment had started more than a year prior, on May 13, 1943, amid the blistering Tunisian sun. General Hans-Jürgen von Arnim's capitulation encompassed not only fighting units but vast numbers of healthcare workers, physicians, aides, and including DRK Schwestern, nurses from the German Red Cross who had supported Rommel's Afrika Korps across 2 years of sandy battles. Captured in that group was DRK Schwester Ilse Schultz, awarded the Iron Cross Second Class in April 1943, one of under 20 females to earn that honor in the conflict. Her associate, DRK Schwester Greta Falk, likewise honored with the Iron Cross that same April, maintained detailed records later unearthed in German Army files. U.S. forces discard more supplies daily than we got monthly. They possess remedies we've merely encountered in stories. The extent of the yield was immense, from 250,000 to 275,000 Axis fighters, encompassing healthcare teams from top units such as the 21st Panzer, 15th Panzer Division, and 90th Light Division. Although the majority of detained medics were male surgeons and assistants, the female caregivers in their midst underwent an especially deep worldview jolt. U.S. handling adhered rigidly to Geneva protocols, executed with impressive speed. In Tunis gathering areas, American doctors classified seized healthcare staff rapidly. Some required for tending Axis casualties stayed on, the rest tagged for relocation. Each detained nurse underwent a checkup with tools long rare in the Afrika Korps. Come June 1943, initial batches of these captured Germans boarded Liberty ships bound for America, vessels mass-built in ways that debunked Nazi claims of U.S. manufacturing frailty. The onboard clinics outshone any facilities these nurses knew back home. Surgery rooms with steady power illumination, reliable X-ray units, and chilled drug repositories were routine. Most impressive, typed and preserved blood plasma stocks, deliverable without peril, in contrast to the hazardous whole blood transfers Wehrmacht units tried under battlefield strain. The Atlantic voyage showcased U.S. healthcare plenty every day. Sulfa drugs, doled out by the pinch in German ranks, flowed freely here, dressings tossed after one application. Exhausted German medics, accustomed to scant meals, saw U.S. personnel scrap leftover chow, squander unimaginable in the Wehrmacht. Vessels with these German healthcare captives arrived at East Coast harbors from Norfolk to New York. Their initial views of the U.S., Upended years of indoctrination portraying a country hobbled by slump. In Norfolk Naval Base, intake checks covered full assessments for every detainee, teeth fixed, ailments cured, and vision aids supplied as needed. Such thoroughness. The level of medical attention given to captives surpassed what ordinary Germans back home could access. As the train traveled deeper into the country, it unveiled one surprise after another. Hospitals glowed brightly in successive cities. From the tracks in Richmond, the sprawling Medical College of Virginia stood out prominently. Philadelphia revealed the grand architecture of Pennsylvania hospitals. Each city boasted healthcare setups that outshone those in Germany's largest urban areas. During a halt in Washington, D.C., volunteers from the American Red Cross climbed aboard to hand out parcels to the German POWs, items like personal hygiene products, smokes, sweets, and stationery. Nurses steeped in Nazi doctrines of racial conflict found it hard to grasp this generosity directed at foes. Established in September 1942, Camp Opelika in Alabama welcomed its initial batch of Afrika Korps medics the following June in 1943. The site's infirmary turned into a distinctive setting where German healers, versed in Hitler's racial doctrines, collaborated with U.S. practitioners focused on evidence-based care. Adhering to Geneva Convention guidelines, the setup featured dual teams. American doctors oversaw operations while Germans handled hands-on treatment. This arrangement forged a remarkable dynamic, adversary clinicians functioning inside the U.S. Armed Forces Health Network. The infrastructure left German nurses in awe. Surgery suites boasted tools familiar only from books, such as electronic cauterizers, height-adjustable operating lamps, and quick-cycle steam sterilizers. The drug dispensary stocked countless remedies in temperature-regulated units, with shelf lives extending years into the future. On July 21, 1944, Glennon General Hospital in Okmulgee, Oklahoma, transformed into the premier German prisoner of war general hospital, equipped with 990 beds and run by joint American-German medical units. Colonel Henry W. Misch brought about an idea inconceivable under the Nazi regime. Combined teams exchanging expertise despite the war. Nurses from the NS Schwesternschaft, who had been drilled to view U.S. medicine as inferior and tainted, encountered a practice grounded in strict scientific principles. What most rattled their beliefs were the black nurses posted to POW wards, a consequence of U.S. Armed Forces racial policies that assigned African American caregivers to enemy detainees instead of white troops. These German observers watched as those skilled professionals delivered expert treatment, shattering every prejudice ingrained in their training. No element highlighted U.S. medical dominance more strikingly than penicillin. In 1943, America manufactured 21 billion units. By 1945, output soared to 6.8 trillion units. Lacking reliable antibacterials, German medics marveled at the everyday deployment of this wonder remedy. At Camp Forest in Tennessee, home to German POWs and robust medical resources, the nurses saw recoveries they deemed unattainable. Ailments that spelled doom in German frontline setups resolved in mere days. Instead of lopping off limbs as their surgeons might have, American physicians preserved them. Many U.S. medical officers, often doctors from civilian life-donning uniforms, passed on insights without reservation. Such candor toward opponents flew in the face of all that German health workers had absorbed about combat and healing. The U.S. blood plasma program marked yet another advance far ahead of German methods. Accurate blood grouping, compatibility checks, and storage techniques averted the deadly complications from the straight transfusions Germans still relied on. In places like the 21st General Hospital at Ravenneauville, France, where seized German staff served starting December 1944, the blood logistics ran like a well-oiled factory. Plasma kept viable for months, shipped across continents, and given even without type knowledge, feats German medicine had yet to master. Indoctrinated in the NS Schwesternschaft, these nurses had been schooled that healthcare advanced racial purity. Their curriculum covered Unser Rasse genetics and ethnic sciences, stressing the removal of frail individuals to bolster the folk. Yet at operations like the 12th Field Hospital's massive 30,000-bed POW setup, They saw the reverse in action. U.S. Caregivers tended to German detainees with the exact same rigor as their own injured, allocating limited drugs, operations, and bedside support equally to adversaries and allies alike. This core contrast, medicine as a tool for all humanity versus one for ethnic engineering, started to erode their doctrinal foundations. The 1943 Christmas brought a deep emotional jolt. U.S. groups dispatched 500,000 care kits to German POWs, filled with hard-to-get items like coffee, chocolate, tobacco, and cleansing bars. At Camp Alva in Oklahoma, set aside for Africa Corps members, community churches performed traditional German hymns. Young scouts brought personally crafted greetings. Relatives of soldiers battling overseas contributed baked goods from home. The holiday meal, roast turkey, cured ham, fresh produce, and sweets, surpassed any feast German troops had enjoyed in ages. In their records, the nurses captured their bewilderment, opponents extending faith-based compassion even as their homeland's broadcasts urged animosity. By 1944, the Special Projects Division rolled out extensive training initiatives. Nurses from Germany participated in sessions held at places such as the University of Nebraska Medical School in Fort Robinson. The subjects covered dramatically shifted their perspectives, discussions on medical morals and the entitlements of patients, along with the application of scientific principles in patient care. The instructional approach, which promoted inquiry, discussion, and even opposition, stood in stark contrast to their rigid, top-down education back home. Exposure to U.S. medical publications delivered yet another jolt. A significant portion of German breakthroughs in medicine had originated from Jewish researchers driven out by the Nazi government. This realization triggered intense mental conflict with healthcare workers heading back to the continent. German nurses took on more roles in army medical facilities. On July 31, 1945, at the 45th General Hospital in Bari, Italy, they began caring for captured Germans. They operated under immediate oversight from Americans. In Colonel Charles A. Pfeffer's unit, care was extended impartially to everyone. That included troops from the Allies, local Italian residents, and German POWs. These nurses ended up applying U.S. methods and drugs to aid individuals their former beliefs had labeled as lesser. U.S. healthcare tools appeared far more advanced by years. Devices like X-ray units, which were rare in Germany, were commonplace. Heart monitoring machines or electrocardiographs that few German nurses had encountered became everyday tools. In setups such as the 3rd Convalescent Hospital, active from May through September 1945, they gained hands-on familiarity with gear they'd previously only dreamed of. Sterilizers that cleaned in mere minutes instead of hours, powered aspirators taking over from manual ones. Basic upgrades, such as beds that could be adjusted easily, marked real progress. The spring of 1945 delivered the harshest truth. Films of the camp liberations were screened for German POWs in medical roles who had supported the Nazi apparatus, plunging them into a profound ethical reckoning. Early refusals to accept it gave way as proof piled up. Accounts from U.S. doctors who first arrived at the sites, images and correspondence from their own country verifying the facts. They had contributed to a regime that twisted healing into extermination. U.S. leaders managed this with care, stressing that the field of medicine bore no blame but should always prioritize care over any doctrine. Officials in America launched focused efforts to purge Nazi influences among healthcare staff. Required classes delved into professional standards and values of democracy, incorporating real-world examples that illustrated how bias-driven approaches damaged care, whereas evidence-based ones preserved it. At Camp Apellica, Lieutenant Colonel Dorothy Whitman organized visits for German nurses to watch U.S. nursing in action, highlighting record-keeping and championing patient needs. The core idea was clear. Expertise in procedures alone fell short without moral grounding. During their internment, the sheer volume of U.S. medical resources left German staff amazed. Facilities tossed out drugs just past their dates, items Germany could scarcely manufacture. Tools got swapped at the slightest damage, rather than patched up endlessly. Such apparent excess underscored a reality that debunked Nazi claims. The U.S. generated endless medical goods via its factories without needing to seize lands. While Germany scrambled for scraps, America innovated abundance, the U.S. This approach to nursing upended the German sense of their profession. Under Nazism, strict chains of command required blind compliance. In contrast, American nurses acted as independent experts with considerable freedom. They had the leeway to challenge physician directives, propose other options, and decide on their own within limits. This vision of the job was alien to German practice and redefined what nursing meant. Captain Helen Morrison, speaking at Glennon, put it plainly. You own the results for your patients. If issues arise, voice them, no matter the rank involved. Such authority reshaped how they viewed their duties. The involvement of African American healthcare workers sparked deep internal clashes. German nurses served alongside black experts who displayed exceptional expertise and competence. At Camp Florence in Arizona, Lieutenant Elena Powell oversaw the German team with authority that shattered their ingrained prejudices. As she refined methods or demonstrated steps, it forced the Germans to face the lies in their racial indoctrination. The contradiction was striking. U.S. policies still segregated, directing black nurses toward POWs. But even this imperfect setup yielded superior results compared to Nazi racial pseudoscience. Following Italy's capitulation in September 1943, medical workers from that nation who collaborated got preferential handling. German nurses observed as their ex-partners enjoyed freedoms they lacked. This practical stance, based on present behavior rather than old loyalties, differed sharply from the inflexible Nazi worldview. Italian staff moved about unescorted, while Germans, clinging to their doctrines, remained watched closely. Even as captives, the German nurses accessed training that surpassed what they'd known in their country. U.S. leaders freely instructed on fresh procedures, drugs, and device handling. Information flowed openly. Lessons from Pacific Burns Care, along with cutting-edge surgical developments, German nurses, fresh from frontline duties in Europe against Allied forces, were instructed in techniques meant for adversaries. These professionals meticulously recorded their lessons, aware that they would soon face a devastated homeland desperate for healthcare knowledge. As the conflict concluded in May 1945, U.S. officials equipped these German medics for their return home via thorough educational programs. The curriculum addressed community hygiene, outbreak management, crisis care, and methods to revive the nation's shattered healthcare infrastructure. Participants gained expertise in sanitizing water supplies, conducting large-scale immunizations, and addressing nutritional deficiencies. Colonel Richard Stevens emphasized to them, "You'll encounter enormous healthcare demands upon your return. This education represents our commitment to a democratic Germany." Instruction also encompassed setting up basic treatment centers with scarce supplies, educating support staff, and enacting sanitation initiatives. Upon completion, the nurses earned certificates verifying their U.S.-based instruction, which held significant worth in the post-war occupation zones. Those who repatriated from 1945 to 1946 encountered a landscape where 60% of German medical centers lay in ruins. They imported not only U.S. methods, but a profoundly altered approach to healthcare. Ex-captives who had been prisoners of war, POWs, founded educational institutions for nursing that prioritized patient rights above political doctrines. Protocols from America took root in reconstructed sites. Systems for storing blood followed U.S. designs. The application of antibiotics adhered to American protocols in an organized manner. By November 1945, with few U.S. healthcare workers still in Germany, these newly skilled Germans proved vital to sustaining public wellness. The impact lingered well past the initial recovery phase. In 1950, numerous nursing academies in Germany were directed by these former POWs. They integrated principles absorbed during their detention in U.S. facilities, such as assessing patient needs, championing individual care, and lifelong learning. Drug manufacturers in Germany embraced production benchmarks they had seen while imprisoned. Medical institutions restructured themselves based on the U.S. systems they had directly observed. The shift from doctrine-driven to evidence-based practice solidified enduringly. Figures underscore the breadth of this effort. Overall, 371,683 German POWs passed through U.S. custody. More than 200 healthcare sites employed German workers. Recorded hours of medical instruction exceeded 100,000. Countless procedures, hundreds of thousands, were carried out. Over 15 nursing programs were launched by these returnees, as documented. Dozens of hospitals in the American sector underwent reorganization per U.S. standards. Each educated nurse shaped the practices of many peers. Every updated facility served thousands of individuals. The cascading benefits grew immeasurably. In 1995, elderly German nurses who had endured U.S. internment composed a declaration. "We had worked under the Nazi authority and then became captives of the Americans. We affirm that healthcare twisted by dogma turns into a tool of destruction, whereas practice grounded in evidence and empathy promotes vitality. The Americans revealed to us a wealth of supplies we could scarcely fathom: drugs, equipment, materials. Even more crucially, they exemplified care free from animosity. They regarded foes as individuals worthy of impartial treatment. Upon our release, we carried back far more than technical skills. We conveyed the insight that recovery surpasses borders and beliefs, passing it to upcoming generations in the field. Ensure that healing always prevails over doctrine and medicine. U.S. physicians and caregivers instilled this truth by extending humanity and mercy to adversaries. We entered as detainees, but departed as testifiers to healthcare's core mission. The evolution of these German nurses during their time in American detention marks one of the most effective shifts in worldview from World War II. They observed not merely advanced tools, but the essence of medicine, restoration without bias. Their path from supporters of Nazi healthcare to proponents of objective practice highlights how lived encounters can eclipse indoctrination. Routine immersion in U.S. clinical routines achieved what coercion never could: a total reevaluation of beliefs. The 9 nurses who surfaced from the hidden hospital in Cherbourg on July 2, 1944, symbolized the multitudes who underwent this awakening. They had begun imprisonment convinced of German preeminence. They emerged recognizing that superior care stems from research, ample provisions, and boundless empathy. This stands as America's paramount triumph in the medical realm, proving via everyday application that compassionate practice outshines politicized versions. These nurses were not merely taken prisoner, they were reshaped by beholding medicine's authentic role. Their changed outlook formed the bedrock for reconstructing post-war German healthcare on principles of aid rather than supremacy. In their personal metamorphosis resides evidence that even deeply embedded convictions can yield to compelling proof of a superior path. The German nurses seized by U.S. troops realized their opponents held not only greater assets, but a more enlightened healthcare ethos. They had been schooled to view medicine as an extension of ethnic supremacy. They came to see it as a service to all humankind. That realization, forged in American confinement, would redefine German medicine across decades. Their narrative endures as a powerful affirmation: scientific and empathetic practice will invariably prevail over versions tainted by prejudice and dogma. Prisoners transformed into observers, adversaries evolved into allies. Through this profound shift, the practice of medicine reclaimed its noble calling: care that knows no frontiers, knowledge untainted by bias, empathy embracing every soul in pain.